On a March morning in 2012, a man in a hard hat stood on scaffolding inside the most important room in Florence and pointed an industrial drill at one of the most famous frescoes in Italy. He was not a vandal, he was a scientist, and he was about to bore 6 holes straight through a 450-year-old masterpiece because he believed that hidden in the dark behind that wall, sealed inside the masonry like a body in a tomb, was the largest painting Leonardo da Vinci ever made. A painting the entire world has been told for 5 centuries was destroyed and lost forever. How do you lose the biggest painting by the most famous artist who ever lived? And what if it was never lost at all? What if a rival simply built a brick wall in front of it, painted his own masterpiece on top, and left a coded message hanging 12 meters in the air, telling anyone clever enough to read it exactly where to look? 2 green words stitched onto a painted war banner that have been screaming the secret at us since 1563. This is the story of the lost Leonardo entombed inside a Florentine wall, the clue hidden in plain sight, the drill that found pigment that has no business existing, and the order from the government that shut the whole hunt down 3 holes short of the answer. To understand what may be inside that wall, you have to go back to the year 1503. Florence is a republic fragile and proud, and it has just commissioned the 2 greatest artists alive to decorate the council chamber of its new government, the Hall of the 500. On one wall, Michelangelo Buonarroti. On the other wall, Leonardo da Vinci. 2 titans in their absolute prime, told to paint enormous battle scenes facing each other across the same room. It is, to this day, the single greatest head-to-head matchup in the history of art. The duel of the century, the Renaissance equivalent of putting 2 heavyweight champions in one ring and locking the door. Leonardo's assignment was the Battle of Anghiari, a Florentine victory over Milan from 1440, but Leonardo did not paint a tidy, heroic battle. He painted the most violent, chaotic, terrifying thing anyone had ever attempted, a knot of screaming men and rearing horses fighting over a single flag, faces twisted in rage. Animals biting each other, the whole composition a churning storm of muscle and steel. He called it, in his notebooks, a study of the beastly madness of war. When it was unveiled in its unfinished state, artists came from across Italy to copy it. They called the central scene the fight for the standard, and they called the hall itself something extraordinary. They called it the school of the world. Here is what you have to grasp. Every artist who saw this thing, including a young Raphael, including Michelangelo himself, understood they were looking at a turning point. Leonardo had taken painting somewhere it had never been, and then it vanished. So what happened to it? The conventional story, the one in most textbooks, is a tragedy of arrogance. Leonardo, being Leonardo, refused to paint a normal fresco. Fresco means painting fast onto wet plaster, and Leonardo hated fast. He worked slowly, in glazes, layer over translucent layer, the way he built the smoke and shadow of the Mona Lisa. So he gambled. He tried to revive an ancient technique he had read about in the Roman writer Pliny, an encaustic method, paint-bound in heated wax that he could work and rework at his own pace. It was a catastrophe. According to the early accounts, Leonardo finished the central group and the upper portions, then lit braziers beneath the wall to set the wax and dry the paint. The heat rose unevenly. The lower part of the painting was too far from the flames to fuse, and the upper part, the great fight for the standard, began to run. One contemporary wrote that the colors started to melt and slide down the wall before his eyes. The most ambitious painting Leonardo had ever attempted was sweating itself off the plaster in real time. And there was nothing he could do but watch. Leonardo abandoned the project around 1506. He left Florence for Milan and never finished it. And this is the part the textbooks rush past. He left the central scene on the wall. It was damaged, yes, partially run, yes, but it was there. The fight for the standard, the section everyone came to copy, the most famous fragment of painting in Italy, sat on that wall in the Hall of the 500 for the next 50-plus years. People came to look at it for decades. Visitors describe it, artists sketch from it well into the 1,550 seconds. So the painting was not lost in Leonardo's lifetime. It was lost later, and it was lost on purpose. Fast forward to 1563. Florence is no longer a republic. It is ruled by Duke Cosimo I di Medici, and Cosimo wants the old council hall transformed into a throne room worthy of an absolute ruler. The man he hires to do it is named Giorgio Vasari. Now, here's where it gets extraordinary. Vasari is not just a painter. He is the first art historian. He literally wrote the book, The Lives of the Artists, the foundational text of art history, the reason we tell these stories the way we do. And in that very book, Vasari worships Leonardo da Vinci. He calls him divine. He describes the Battle of Anghiari with awe. Vasari believed Leonardo was the closest thing to a god that the art of painting had ever produced. And in 1563, Giorgio Vasari was ordered to remodel the Hall of the 500, the room that contained Leonardo's mural. He raised the ceiling, enlarged the walls, and covered every surface with his own enormous frescoes celebrating Cosimo's military victories. 6 huge battle scenes painted by Vasari and his workshop that are still on those walls today, which means Vasari, the man who called Leonardo divine, is also the man who is supposed to have destroyed Leonardo's greatest painting to make room for his own. And that, for centuries, was the assumption that Vasari knocked down the wall, smashed the Leonardo to rubble, and built over it. Case closed. The greatest painting in the world demolished by the man who literally invented art history. Except that story never sat right with anyone who knew Vasari. Would the man who called Leonardo divine, the man whose entire life's work was preserving the memory of great artists, really take a hammer to the most celebrated painting in Italy? Or would he do something else? Something a Renaissance architect knew exactly how to do? Would he build a second wall a few centimeters in front of the original, sealing Leonardo's mural in an airtight cavity, and then paint his own work on the new surface? Hide the masterpiece, save it, and leave a sign. In the 1,970 seconds, an American art expert named Carlo Pedretti and others started noticing something strange about one of Vasari's frescoes. The Battle of Marciano, on the east wall, high up near the top in the middle of the chaos of soldiers and lances, there's a small green war flag, and painted onto that green flag in small white letters, easy to miss from the floor 12 meters below, are 2 words, Cerca Trova, seek and you shall find. Now think about who painted that. This is Vasari, the art historian, the Leonardo worshipper, the man who, if anyone did, knew exactly what was on the wall before he covered it. And on the one fresco he paints directly over the spot where Leonardo's mural is believed to have been, he hangs a flag that says, "Keep looking." It is the most tantalizing clue in the history of art. A message written in paint 12 meters in the air, hidden in plain sight for 450 years on a banner held by a soldier in someone else's battle. Now, I have to be honest with you, because this channel does not sell you fairy tales, it cannot back up. Some scholars argue Cerca Trova is just a generic Renaissance motto, a soldier's flag with a pious slogan, nothing more. The phrase appears in religious contexts. It might mean nothing, but here is the thing that keeps even the skeptics up at night. Of all the dozens of flags and banners and inscriptions Vasari could have painted anywhere in that vast room, he put "Seek and you shall find" on the one wall, at the one height, directly in front of the one place where the lost Leonardo is most likely entombed. Coincidence is possible, but Vasari did not do things by accident. The man planned everything, and one obsessed engineer became absolutely convinced the flag was an arrow pointing into the wall. That man was Maurizio Saraceni, and Saraceni is not some treasure-hunting crank. He is a Florentine engineer with a degree in bioengineering, a pioneer of using medical and industrial imaging technology to look inside paintings. The man who scans the body of art the way a hospital scans a patient. He is so respected and so associated with hidden secrets in art that the novelist Dan Brown wrote him into the Da Vinci Code as the only real-life person named in the book. Saraceni spent more than 30 years of his life chasing the Battle of Anghiari, 30 years, and his first breakthrough was architectural. Using radar and laser scanning, his team mapped the actual structure of the east wall, and they found something nobody expected. Behind Vasari's fresco of the Battle of Marciano, precisely in the zone beneath the Cerca Trova flag, there was a gap, an air cavity, a hollow space between Vasari's painted brick surface and an older wall behind it. Vasari, the architect, had not painted directly onto the original wall. He had built a new brick face in front of it and left a void in between. A void exactly where you would build one if you were trying to protect a painting you could not bear to destroy. For Saraceni, this was everything. The hollow was the smoking gun. Vasari hadn't smashed the Leonardo. He had walled it up, but a gap in a wall is not a painting. To prove a lost Leonardo was actually back there, Saraceni needed to get something out of that cavity, a sample, a fleck, any physical evidence at all. And the only way to reach it was to go through Vasari, through the fresco, with a drill. This is the moment the whole story splits the art world in half to sample the hidden cavity. Saraceni's team, working with backing from the city of Florence and the National Geographic Society, proposed drilling narrow holes through Vasari's fresco. Not through the painted figures, they insisted, through small areas that were already cracked or restored, where Vasari's original paint was no longer present. Endoscopic probes, tiny cameras and sampling tools on flexible tubes, would be threaded through the holes into the void to photograph and sample whatever was on the older wall behind in late 2011 and into 2012. They did it, they drilled, and what came back out of that wall electrified everyone who heard about it. The endoscopic camera, snaking through the cavity, found a second surface behind Vasari's wall, and on it, traces of material. The team collected tiny samples and ran them through chemical analysis. And one of those samples was a flake of black pigment, a specific black, a black made with a particular composition, a manganese-bearing black, that matched the pigments found in known Leonardo da Vinci paintings, including the Mona Lisa and the St. John the Baptist in the Louvre. In other words, a black that should not casually exist on a random old Florentine wall, a black consistent with the palette of Leonardo himself. They also reported finding beige material that looked like the kind of priming layer an artist would lay down before painting, and red flecks. Saraceni stood in front of the world's press and said, "In effect, we have not proven it yet, but the evidence is consistent with the lost Leonardo still being there, behind this wall, right now." For one shining moment in March 2012, it looked like the greatest art discovery of the century was about to happen. The school of the world, thought destroyed for 500 years, was about to be reborn out of a hole in a Vasari fresco. And then it all stopped. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Art historians and conservators around the world were horrified. Not by the theory, but by the method. You drilled holes, they said, through a 450-year-old Vasari fresco, itself a masterpiece, itself irreplaceable, itself a protected cultural treasure, on a hunch to find a Leonardo that might not be intact, might be a ruined smear, might not be there at all. More than 150 art scholars signed a petition demanding the project be halted. They accused the team of damaging one certain masterpiece in pursuit of a hypothetical one. And the criticism cut deeper than ethics. Skeptics argued the famous black pigment could have come from anywhere, from later restorations, from Vasari's own materials, from centuries of contamination in an open cavity. A matching pigment is not a Leonardo. It is a clue, not a verdict. The Italian authorities listened. In 2012, the city administration in Florence changed, the political will evaporated, and the Superintendency for Cultural Heritage pulled the permits. The scaffolding came down, the holes were filled, the investigation was suspended. After 30 years of work, after radar maps and air cavities, and a flake of Leonardo black pulled from inside the wall, Maurizio Saraceni was ordered to stop, with the question still unanswered and the cavity sealed shut. Saraceni left Florence. Not long after taking a position in the United States, the wall is still there, the cavity is still there, the Circa Trova flag is still hanging 12 meters up, still saying, "Seek and you shall find," to a city that decided for now to stop seeking. So let me give you my honest read, because that is what this channel is for. Is there a perfectly preserved Leonardo masterpiece hanging in the dark behind that wall, waiting to walk out and rewrite art history? Almost certainly not in that romantic form. The painting was already damaged in Leonardo's own time. It ran, it melted, it was never finished. If anything survives in that cavity, it is most likely a fragment, scarred and partial, of the lower or central portion. Not a triumphant, intact picture, a relic, but a fragment of the Battle of Anghiari. Any fragment, even a few square feet of original Leonardo paint, would still be one of the most important discoveries in the history of Western art. The black pigment is real. The air cavity is real. The Circa Trova flag is real. The circumstantial case that Vasari, the Leonardo worshipping art historian, walled up the master's mural instead of destroying it. That case is genuinely strong. Here is the part that should keep you up at night. We have the technology to find out. We have non-invasive imaging that could, in theory, see through that wall without a single new hole. What we do not have is permission, the most important question in Renaissance art. Whether the largest Leonardo da Vinci ever painted still exists is sitting behind a few centimeters of brick in the center of Florence, and right now, by official order, nobody is allowed to ask it. 500 years ago, the two greatest artists who ever lived faced each other across one room and tried to paint the most violent thing imaginable. One of those paintings, Michelangelo's, was never even finished and survives only in copies. The other, Leonardo's, may still be in that room, not in a copy, not in a memory. The actual paint from the actual hand, sealed in the dark by a man who loved him too much to destroy it and left two words to tell us so. Circa trova, seek, and you shall find. We sought, we may even have found, and then we filled in the holes and walked away. If a story about a lost masterpiece entombed behind a wall is the kind of thing that keeps your mind running long after the video ends, that is exactly what this channel does every single week. We go behind the frame, behind the legend, and sometimes literally behind the wall to the parts of art history they do not put on the museum label. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you are in the room the next time we find a body in the masonry. Because in art history, the most dangerous secrets are never the ones on the wall. They are the ones behind it.